Welcome, everyone, to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the NROL 48 mission. We're now less than 30 minutes from the planned liftoff from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. I'm Stephen Young, and I'll be providing our commentary today. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Will Robinson-Smith is on assignment at the Johnson Space Center this week. NASA is announcing the names of the latest group of astronauts and will also be briefing the news media on the upcoming Artemis II mission to circle the moon. Be sure to follow him and the rest of our team on social media. I am also joined today by John Pisani, who's behind the scenes pushing the buttons and running the technical side of today's broadcast. At this point, SpaceX should be loading propellants aboard its Falcon 9 rocket ahead of the planned liftoff at 10:38 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. That's 1:38 p.m. on the East Coast, or 17:38 UTC for our viewers around the world. Inside the Falcon 9's payload fairing is believed to be a batch of Starshield satellites for the National Reconnaissance Office. That's the secretive government department which manages the United States fleet of spy satellites. Before we dive into our coverage, please hit the like button, click subscribe, and the bell icon. That way you'll get notifications and won't miss any of our live streams. Also share this stream. It helps more people find our coverage and everything else going on with our channel. Spaceflight Now is powered by our viewers and members. If you'd like to do more to help expand our coverage of the space program, we would very much appreciate it if you would consider making a donation through the Super Chat feature or by becoming a member of our YouTube channel. Membership grants you access to our special members-only videos, as well as discounts in our online shop and our Discord channel. A huge thank you to everyone who's made a contribution to help fund our coverage. We can't do this without your support. The weather at Vandenberg so far this morning has been typical for the West Coast launch site. And when I say typical, I mean foggy. Visibility has been severely restricted in the area of the launch pad. As you can see from this satellite imagery from Nose Goes West, we'll see how things look at the pad when SpaceX starts streaming about 10 minutes prior to launch. We'll bring you those pictures as soon as we have them. Hopefully the fog will have lifted by there. You can see in this satellite imagery that the fog was retreating towards the coast. It's not clear if it will have moved offshore by the time we reach the T0 for this launch in now less than 24 and a half minutes. Well, with that clock ticking away, it's time to take a look at the countdown timeline for today's mission. Before we came on air, the launch director performed a go, no-go poll of their team, which is based at the Launch Control Center at Vandenberg. That is located about 11 miles north of the pad. Today's launch will also be supported by teams at SpaceX's Mission Control in Hawthorne, California. The automated countdown sequence began with the loading of propellant at T-minus 35 minutes. That process starts with the loading of kerosene on the first and second stages, along with liquid oxygen for the first stage. With 30 minutes left on the clock, cryogenic helium load starts. The helium is loaded into the carbon fiber pressure vessels, which are stowed inside the rocket's liquid oxygen tanks. That helium plays an important role pressurizing the rocket's tanks as the propellants are consumed. This keeps liquid oxygen and kerosene flowing through the pipework into the Merlin engines. The loading of helium starts with the first stage and continues with the second stage 4 minutes later. Loading of kerosene on the second stage should wrap up at around the T-minus 23-minute mark. Meanwhile, loading of kerosene into the much larger first stage fuel tank will continue until the final minutes of the countdown. The next major event coming up in the countdown is the start of the strongback chill down process. That actually begins in the next few seconds. The strongback structure is the truss-like assembly that you see sitting alongside the rocket on the launch pad. In addition to supporting the vehicle, it serves as the conduit for propellant lines, air conditioning, and power for both the rocket's second stage and the payload fairing. If we could see the launch pad, this chill down would be visible in the form of the so-called big vent. This cloud of vapor is created as the liquid oxygen lines are cooled before the next major milestone in the countdown. That comes at the T-minus 16-minute mark, when it's the turn of liquid oxygen to start flowing through those strongback lines into the second stage of the Falcon 9. At T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin first stage engines will get underway. A small amount of liquid oxygen is flowed through the plumbing and turbo pumps. As the name suggests, this cools down the engines to protect them from the thermal shock and potential damage when propellants start flowing during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes prior to liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. And then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strongback structure that we talked about earlier start retracting from the Falcon 9 rocket. Prior to this, the pressure will be increased in the propellant tanks to strengthen the structure of the rocket. This is necessary as that strongback structure actually provides physical support for the vehicle, prevents any movement caused by wind during the fueling process. The strongback at Vandenberg is a little different from the ones at Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center. It will recline to an angle of about 13 degrees and remain in that position through liftoff. This is actually the way that the original strongback at Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral used to perform, but the new version of that strongback has the throwback that pulls it away right at the moment of liftoff. About 3 minutes before ignition, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full. A minute later, approximately, liquid oxygen loading should be complete on the second stage. At that point, the Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of cryogenic propellants and RP-1 kerosene. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown will be handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure, and the SpaceX launch director should give their final go for liftoff if everything is looking good. The engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. If all 9 Merlin 1D engines ignite and are healthy, the flight computer will command the hold-down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for a liftoff at T0 at 10:38 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. We're at T-minus 15 minutes and 15 seconds. The loading of liquid oxygen aboard the second stage of the Falcon 9 should now be underway. With less than 14 minutes left on the clock, let's talk a little bit about the plan once the Falcon 9 lifts off from Space Launch Complex 4 East. This pad was first used in the 1960s to launch Atlas and then Titan rockets for the U.S. military. SpaceX took over the pad in 2011 and converted it for Falcon 9 launches. So we're expecting ignition of the Falcon 9's 9 Merlin engines when the clock hits 0 at 10:38 Pacific time. The Falcon 9 will take off in a southeasterly trajectory, flying along the coast of Southern California and passing the city of Los Angeles. Because it's a daylight launch, it might be tricky to follow its ascent if you're further downrange from Vandenberg than the immediate area. Previously, these NROL missions carrying satellites for the proliferated architecture. Sorry, it's not the easiest thing to say. Previously, they've mostly carried in the region of about 20 satellites, up to 22 aboard a single mission. But this flight will actually be returning to the launch site. So a little over a minute into flight, we will see the maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle. We'll get to the first stage main engine cutoff, 2 minutes, 12 seconds into flight. That will be followed by the stage separation. And because this booster is coming back after the ignition of the second stage, we will see a boost back burn to reverse the trajectory of that first stage. Also, because this is a classified mission, we won't be seeing views of that second stage, which will jettison the payload fairing at 2 minutes and 56 seconds into flight. So by this point, the first stage booster will have turned around and will perform a 15-second entry burn and begin its, that will slow its descent into the atmosphere so it doesn't burn up, and put it on target for return to the pad at Vandenberg. We'll see a single engine on the first stage ignite at 7 minutes and 18 seconds for that landing burn. And if all goes according to plan, we'll see touchdown a few seconds later, about 7 minutes and 36 seconds into flight. Very soon we'll be getting pictures of the pad from SpaceX, and we'll bring those to you as soon as we have them. Just getting those organized right now. T-minus 9 minutes and counting. The next major event will be the chill down of those 9 Merlin engines on the first stage. And as you can see, the conditions are pretty foggy at Vandenberg, not as bad as we have seen. The good news is that SpaceX reports that weather conditions are acceptable for launch. The fog does not present a problem, and when the Falcon 9 lifts off, we will get onboard camera views, and perhaps we'll also get some tracking views from cameras that are located on hilltops around the launch site that are above the marine layer. Last week, we did have some unusual weather in the Vandenberg area, some thunderstorm activity that caused a couple of launch scrubs, but that is pretty rare. SpaceX showing a graphic that depicts the vehicle. Falcon 9 stands 70 meters or 229 feet tall, has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Bottom 2/3 of the rocket is the first stage. That's tail number 1081, making its 18th flight. Above the first stage is the interstage, not shown on this SpaceX graphic. If you could indeed make out, maybe you can see just that black cylinder there. Now taking a look at the landing zone 4, where the Falcon 9 booster will return. That black structure I was talking about is the interstage. Above that is the second stage, which has that second stage Merlin vacuum engine on it. It's designed to provide more than 200,000 pounds of thrust. It uses the same propellant as the first stage, liquid oxygen and kerosene. And above that are the payload fairings. We have confirmation of RP1 load complete. And those fairing halves have flown for, one half has flown for 28 times and the other for 27. Those payload fairings will be recovered by the recovery vessels, which located downrange in the Pacific. They'll gently land under parafoils and be fished out of the water. Coming up at the point where the tanks will be pressurized for the retraction of the strongback.
The base. During the retraction process.
And we have confirmation from SpaceX that that pressurization is getting underway for the retraction of the strongback. Once again, that strongback structure retracts to an angle of about 13 degrees. Stays there for the remainder of the countdown and liftoff. And we have confirmation that the retraction of the strongback has begun. That starts with the opening of clamp arms that are attached to the top of the second stage of the vehicle. A little hard to see that retraction process with the foggy conditions at Vandenberg this morning. You can see the base of that strongback structure quite clearly, but the top half is quite obscured in the fog. We're coming up at the point in the countdown where the rocket's autonomous destruct system will be armed. And liquid oxygen topping should be terminated soon. And we have confirmation from SpaceX that stage 1 LOX loading has completed. Still loading aboard the second stage. Coming up at the T-minus 2-minute mark, the Falcon 9 will switch to its internal power supply. The thrust vector control system on the second stage is being tested. T-minus 2 minutes. Everything appears to be on track. Let's listen in to the countdown.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And with that call, we have confirmation that the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellants. We should start to see some venting. You can just see that through the fog as SpaceX performs some purges of the propellant lines at the launch pad. You can see the Falcon 9 making its own fog within the fog.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And with that call, we have confirmation that the onboard computer has taken control of the countdown. We'll listen in for the launch director's final go.
For launch.
And there we have it, confirmation that all is ready for the liftoff of this Falcon 9. Let's listen in to the SpaceX audio for the final seconds of the countdown.
T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of Falcon 9. Go SpaceX, go NRL 48.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
MOD chamber pressures are nominal.
At T plus 30 seconds and counting, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Vandenberg Space Force Base. And in just a few seconds, we'll throttle the engines down in preparation for max Q, a period of maximum aerodynamic pressure. This is a critical moment during flight because the combined stresses caused by Falcon 9 accelerating through the atmosphere and the ambient static pressure are at their greatest.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
To help go from vertical to horizontal, the first stage also performed a pitch kick just after liftoff. This is a maneuver known as a gravity turn, where the engines gimbal a small amount, and it turns the first stage from going straight up to
max Q.
Horizontal. We just heard the confirmation of max Q, where the rocket experienced the greatest mechanical stress during flight. The rocket typically needs to go 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back to Earth and get into orbit. You can track our progress to orbit by watching the left corner of your display. That's showing first stage, velocity, and altitude. Now, coming up, we have several events in quick succession. We should hear all these called out by Mission Control, starting with main engine cutoff, or MECO, then stage separation, stage 1 flip, second engine start 1, and boost back burn. Main engine cutoff is when we shut down all 9 M1D engines on the first stage. Stage separation is when the first and second stages of Falcon 9 decouple from one another. Stage 1 flip is when the booster uses its nitrogen gas thrusters to flip the booster's orientation around. Second engine start 1, we will light the MVAC engine on the second stage for the first time, and after that is boost back burn, where the engines will light to place stage 1 on a trajectory to the landing zone. So keep an eye out for those events happening back to back.
Stage separation confirmed.
Eco. MVAC startup.
And there we had confirmation of MECO, stage separation, stage 1 flip, second engine start 1, and boost back burn. Coming up will be fairing separation just a few seconds from now. The fairing jettisons away from the second stage as it is no longer needed to protect the payload once we're in space.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Great confirmation of fairing separation, and as mentioned earlier, we will be attempting to retrieve those fairing halves again once they fall back to Earth. Now, coming up next will be the shutdown of the boost back burn. We are currently at T plus 3 minutes and about 30 seconds into today's mission, and the next major milestone is coming up at the T plus 6 minute mark. You should see the first stage's entry burn on your screen. To start that entry burn, we will be lighting the 3 M1D engines on the first stage, starting with the center engine, known as E9, and followed shortly by the E1 and E5 engines. This is similar to pumping the brakes to slow the vehicle down as it passes back into Earth's atmosphere. We need to do this to slow down and reduce re-entry forces, which will help us recover and reuse the first stage. During the entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating by firing its Merlin engines, but the vehicle is still moving really fast. And this causes it to fly through Merlin's exhaust gases, also known as the rocket's plume, which deposits a layer of soot on the vehicle's surface. That's why our flight-proven vehicles look the way that they do. That soot comes from the carbon-based fuel that Falcon 9 uses, and with each flight, that layer of soot builds up a little bit more on the surface of the vehicle.
Both vehicles are on a nominal trajectory.
Now we are still more than 1 minute away from the beginning of the entry burn. On the left side of your screen, you can see the first stage decelerating and making its way back to Earth. At the request of our customer, we will not be displaying any views of stage 2 for today. We do have some great views of the Falcon 9 first stage on its return journey, and it's not only using those Merlin engines, but also nitrogen gas thrusters and titanium grid fins for control. Reusability is key to lowering the cost of spaceflight, enabling more investments in critical space infrastructure. The Falcon 9 first stage supporting today's mission is performing this entry burn for its 18th time. And the payload fairings are also flight proven, with one half flying for its 28th time and the other for its 27th.
Getting great tracking views of the Falcon 9 booster as it heads back towards Vandenberg Space Force Base to that foggy launch site that it departed from a little less than 6 minutes ago. Those bursts of white that you're seeing in this onboard camera view are the cold gas thrusters that are helping to steer the Falcon 9. And we see the start of the entry burn.
Burn has begun for the first stage. This will last about 15 seconds, and again, we're slowing the vehicle down in preparation for its final burn and landing. Now, the entry burn is shut down on the first stage, and coming up next will be the landing burn in a little bit less than a minute from now. The Merlin engines on the Falcon first stage are optimized for sea level, and they each achieve around 190,000 pounds of thrust each during ascent and descent. At liftoff,
that Falcon 9 booster plunging back through the atmosphere, still at an altitude of about 9 kilometers, traveling just going under the speed of sound. Coming up on the landing burn.
now the landing burn has begun for the Falcon 9 first stage. This is the final burn the booster will perform before landing. Another successful landing of our Falcon 9 rocket. This was the
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
This was the 18th launch and landing for this first stage.
And there we see it, the Falcon 9 back on solid Earth at Launch Zone 4 at Vandenberg, LC4. This is just a short distance from the Slick 4 East pad where it took off just 8 minutes and 22 seconds ago. The 18th flight of Booster 1081. Started its career on the East Coast, launching the Crew 7 mission. So the second stage of this Falcon 9 booster will place these, what I believe to be Starshield satellites, which are based on SpaceX's Starlink vehicles. It's a military version, government version of the Starlink that has been employed by the National Reconnaissance Office for its proliferated architecture, a constellation of satellites that are designed to be more resilient than the billion-dollar satellites that the organization relied on in the past. Much more difficult for foreign nations to interfere with multiple satellites. And also, with many satellites in orbit, you're able to get the reconnaissance information that you're seeking in a much more timely fashion. You don't have to wait for a satellite to pass over the area. If you're relying on a single satellite, that's a problem. But with multiple satellites, you've got multiple opportunities to gather the intelligence that you're looking for. Just dipping into the chat quickly, a big thank you to Chuck Close for a $25 super chat. Thank you, Chuck, for your support. So with that, let's wrap up our coverage as the rest of this mission has now flown into a news blackout with the classified nature of the flight. This was the 18th flight of Falcon 9 Booster 1081, the 537th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 120th Falcon 9 of this year, and this is the 162nd SpaceX orbital launch in the last 365 days. We like to use this metric to keep track of SpaceX's launch cadence. Gives you a better sense of where they are in their goal of reaching 170 odd launches by the end of the year. This was the 150th SpaceX orbital launch from Space Launch Complex 4 East, and the 218th launch overall from that pad. And taking a look at our bar chart, shows the increase in flight rate, 120 flights under SpaceX's belt this year, compared with 134 in the entire year of 2024. So definitely on track to pass the number that SpaceX achieved last year. Looking at the recovery stats, this was the 29th landing for SpaceX at LZ4. The 96th SpaceX landing on land. And the 509th Falcon booster landing overall, including drone ships. Taking a look at the space industry stats. This was the 45th orbital launch from California this year. The 126th orbital launch from US soil. 137th orbital launch by a US rocket company that includes the flights of Rocket Lab's Electron rocket from New Zealand. Rocket Lab, an American company operating out of pads in New Zealand and Wallops Island in Virginia. This was the 217th orbital launch globally. And we have 5 confirmed orbital launch mishaps this year so far. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us for this coverage of the Falcon 9 launch from Vandenberg Space Force Base. It's not the only Falcon 9 rocket that is being readied for liftoff this week. Next up, from Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center, is a NASA science mission, the IMAP mission. It's a ride share, includes a couple of other scientific missions also. It was scheduled to lift off tomorrow, but has been rescheduled for Wednesday because the drone ship was not in position to support the launch. So now looking at a liftoff from the Kennedy Space Center, pad 39A, at 7:30 Eastern Time on Wednesday. So be sure to join us for our coverage of that mission. And don't forget to follow the Spaceflight Now team on social media. In particular, be sure to follow Will, who's in Houston this week, for updates on the latest class of astronauts and the upcoming flight of Artemis 2. NASA will be holding briefings on that mission, which will be the first to carry astronauts aboard the Orion capsule on the Space Launch System rocket. That mission is scheduled to lift off from 39B at the Kennedy Space Center in the early part of next year. It will take astronauts back to the moon on a loop around the moon. They won't actually descend to the surface on this mission. That will be on the next flight, the Artemis 3 mission. Still a lot of work to be done before that, but this mission will pave the way for that. They'll be the first astronauts to visit the vicinity of the moon since the end of the Apollo program in the 1970s. So be sure to follow Will for any updates he has while he is at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. So a big thank you to John Pisani, who was in the background, ready to assist with the technical side of the broadcast. And with that, I'll wish you a very good day, and we'll see you for the next launch on Wednesday.